There we go.
Hello.
Hello. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm ready for this. This is going to be so good.
Good. We got tech happening right off the get-go, so that's a good sign this time as well.
Right on.
I've nailed it down.
Excellent. The dogs were barking right before this. I'm like, okay, you can be all done with that now.
You know what? That's fine. Dogs barking, cars driving, like it's all part of real life, really, So
It's
I'm okay
life.
with this.
That's
Yeah.
life. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. Okay, so I was just going over our notes from the other day. So I'm gonna do like the intro kind of like separately on a separate track.
Yeah.
So we'll just kind of go into it as if like I've just done the intro and then
Yeah.
boom, now we're chatting. So are you
Sounds
ready
good.
to jump right in?
Yeah. Let's go.
Okay. Excellent. Let's go. Thank you so much, Deb, for coming on the show. I'm really excited for this conversation because it gives a really interesting perspective, and something that I've actually never heard of before, which is Hold, something you've been working on for a few years now, hearing out life drama. But before we get into that, I'd love to just start off by asking you the question, what does emotional intelligence mean to you?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here. And let me jump right to the question. What does emotional intelligence mean to me? So I think it's really about having an understanding, that self-awareness within yourself to know what you're feeling and why you're feeling it.
Awesome. And self-awareness is such a huge part of it. It's kind of like the building blocks, right? Like if you don't have awareness, you can't really tackle the rest of it. So I
You
love that
can't.
answer.
Yeah, you really can't. So true.
That's great. So, Hold, Hearing Out Life Drama, is a paid listening service that is not the same as like a traditional talk therapy. So, I'd love for you to share with us a little bit more about what Hold is, how it is different to traditional therapy, and where the idea came from, and how it all kind of got started.
Yeah. So for me, it got started primarily because Um, during a time in my life, my now ex-husband, he was ill for 8 years, and family and friends, they really wanted to be there for me. They did. They tried to be, and but a lot of times, instead of listening, they would give advice, and they would ask me, "Have you tried this? Have you tried this?" And I didn't find that at all helpful. And so I really began to understand that my training made a difference in how I approach the world and how I listen to other people. And so, as I was making a shift in my life to think about how I wanted to move forward, as the funeral home I was working at changed their compensation package, I thought, if I can do anything in the world, what is it I want to do? And one day I was folding my laundry, and the idea came to me: what if I listen? What if that's what I do? What if I listen? As sometimes family and friends, coworkers, they're too close to the problem, or worse, they are the problem. And we just need somebody to hear us. And so it's different than therapy because we're not trying to be therapists. We're simply people that hold space, hold compassionate, caring space without judgment, without anything other than kindness. Yeah.
Awesome. And so talk us a little bit through the process or how someone gets started and what the service actually is. So if someone's, going through a bit of a tough time, they come across you, they reach out, what's kind of the steps that someone's going to go through in your process?
It's super easy. They can simply book online. We are not therapy. And so part of a lot of my core ethics is we won't take anyone past 6 times in a rolling calendar year. If somebody needs more help than that, they probably really do need therapy. And so we want to make sure that we help those people find the help they need. That's very important to me. We're not therapists. None of us are therapists. I'm not, and nor are any of the listeners that I've trained. And so consequently, I do keep a list of coaches and certified therapists in specific states so that if somebody needs more help, we can point them, hopefully, if they need more help than what we can offer. And what we offer is really simple. It's listening. That's it. We listen.
Yeah, and this is done over the phone, Zoom, all of the modalities that we have available to us.
Yeah, phone, Zoom, and chat. So people can choose what they're comfortable with. Sometimes people don't want the face to face. And so we've had one or two people that have chosen the chat option, but primarily most people choose phone or Zoom. So
And I love this as a first step because I feel like for some people, a lot of people really, to take that leap into traditional therapy when they're going through a time can sometimes be a little bit daunting. Like it can be a little bit scary. Often I feel like, people aren't really ready to make the commitment, or even before that, kind of admit that there is something that is worthy of going and seeing a therapist about. Like I hate that there's like a bit of what's the word? Like, just kind of a negative connotation sometimes around therapy, like, "Oh, something's wrong with me, so I have to go to therapy," but which isn't the case. But this, I think, is really cool because if someone's not quite ready to take the leap for whatever reason, they're not feeling super comfortable, or maybe they just don't have the resources, this is such a cool place where people can come, where they can just talk and vent and have someone listen.
I grew up in a really small town in Iowa. It's called Oskaloosa, and the therapy options there weren't a lot. And there was also a stigma. Like there was a big stigma around it, especially through my teenage years. Unfortunately, Hold can only help those who are 18 and over. I tried to work that out with my lawyer, and she's like, "Yeah, nope." so so we are unfortunately an 18 and older service only, but nevertheless, what I find is that oftentimes when you help the parents, you help the kids anyway. So
Yeah, 100%. It's like a domino effect, right?
uh-huh, yeah.
Yeah, amazing. So I'd love to go a little bit deeper onto your story because when we spoke in the pre-interview, I did find it very interesting, how you got to where you are now with this service and with this entire organization where you're helping people. You did mention your ill husband and the funeral home, but you've been on this entire journey of personal development really since you were a little girl is kind of when it first came to be. So I'd love to know more about that.
Yeah, truly. So when I was young, my parents didn't communicate exceptionally well. They struggled with that. The emotional intelligence, neither one of them went to college. And so I was actually the first person in my family to get a college education, and then to go on to grad school. That was even more. Which I was very happy and pleased that I was able to do that. That felt really good. Um, but when I was growing up in my family of origin, there would be times when the communication simply broke down. And there was, I think I shared with you in the pre-call conversation that there was a situation when I was about 7, and we were in the car, and my parents just had a missed communication. And the result of that was road rage erupted from the driver of the car. And suddenly we found ourselves going about 123 miles an hour over in the hilly country of Iowa. It was terrifying to be 7 and in the back seat and not be able to do anything to change what was happening. Um, it was really scary. But I could see already then that there was a better way to communicate, that there was a better way to handle situations when things started to get out of control. I could see that there was something different. I didn't know at 7, of course, what that was, but what it did was it created a drive in me to look at those people around me and try to understand what that might be. So
Yeah, wow. Isn't that interesting? Like something that you experienced as such a young child, like eventually led into, something later on in your life that, I mean, I guess the seed was planted then, right? Where you were like, I can make a difference here. I can see a different way and I can be of service in some way or another. And then you just had all this life experience in between to really figure it out and nail it down.
I was 19 when I really felt I understood that I was on this earth to help people. Like that was why I was here. I was really clear about that. And I thought at that time that that meant that I should be serving in the church. And so, hence, I went to get my graduate degree. I went to seminary. I got my Master Divinity degree. I have a 96-hour Master Divinity with a specialization in care and counseling. And the whole point for that for me was really wanting to be there when people walk through their darkest times, and to walk alongside them and to help them to know that they weren't alone. So yeah.
That's such an interesting realization to have at such a young age as well. Like I don't feel like people who are 19 tend to have so much clarity on their purpose, which is really really cool. I love that for you.
Well, it was hard to get there. I told you just one example from one day from when I was 7. You might be able to extrapolate that to maybe understand that there was a little bit more behind that. That
Of
was rather a
course.
lot that maybe other people might not want to live through. But it got me where I wanted to be ultimately in my life, and I'm glad it did. All of those experiences were formative, and I've done enough work with myself to know that without any of that, I wouldn't be where I am today. So it's all good.
Awesome. So I'd love to pose the question because we spoke about this in a previous conversation about how emotional intelligence and our listening skills are correlated. And we kind of said the same thing, you and I, but we said it backwards. So your statement was how emotional intelligence impacts our listening skills, where I was kind of looking at it from a different angle, thinking that how our listening skills will impact our emotional intelligence. So I'd love to get your perspective and insight on that. It's funny. It's really just flipping the sentence backwards, but it actually means a completely different thing. So
It really does. And I didn't know after we talked, I was like, did I make her uncomfortable when I said that? Well, maybe I did, but if so, she'll think about it a little more and maybe we'll talk about it more. So, for me personally, what I really understand and know for myself is that my my sense of emotional intelligence that has to come first, because if I'm not calm, I can't listen. It's simply not possible. If you I don't think it's true of anybody. I think that's the very first step in order to be able to listen, is to be able to establish that sense of calm. And so that's why I believe that that emotional intelligence piece has to come first, and it's why I talk about it in the courses that I've written. Yeah.
yeah, and there's many different elements to emotional intelligence. I mean, we're talking about a wider umbrella here with, a few different kind of subcategories within that. And relationship building is obviously a huge part of that. So I think listening skills is probably safe to say kind of falls under that relationship building aspect of emotional intelligence. Um, and we did talk about as well, obviously depending on like what line of work you're in or why you're wanting to improve your listening skills or your emotional intelligence skills. That could either be in kind of like a business sense, or it could be just like pure and simple relationship building, whether that be family, friends, etc. So either way, developing our listening skills is going to help us, increase sales, build our businesses, but also build relationships, which in one way or another is obviously connected. If you're building relationships in business, then you're going to have sales. So I'd love to go a little deeper on the relationship aspect and just I guess some key strategies and some key things to be aware of when we're thinking and talking about becoming better listeners in the direction of relationship building.
Yeah, communication is really the foundation of relationship. And I believe that listening is the foundation of that communication. And so, whether we're talking about business or whether we're talking about personal relationships, it all is an essential life skill. And so, it's just really all right there for me. So, I think that by thinking about relationships and making sure that we put listening first, then our relationships go deeper there. That connection is much deeper. You're going to build, if we're going to talk about sales, that rapport is going to be built. So yeah.
And I think for me personally, just thinking back to kind of when I, started out or was closer to the beginning of my emotional intelligence journey, listening was not really something that I guess came naturally or came so easy. I would always find myself in conversation already thinking about the next thing I was going to say instead of actually listening to the other person. And I know that it takes a bit of practice and it takes a bit of skill. But would you have any kind of suggestions how to go from being, I guess, like an inactive listener to an active listener? Like, what are some things that we can work on to actually make that switch?
I think one of the deepest pieces, so I teach the core of listening. I use an acronym, and it stands for calm, outcome, relate, and empathy. And in this, to answer your question, I'm going to really dive into the relate aspect of this. And so, in order to really listen without listening to respond, that's what you just described, listening to respond. Instead, when we're focusing on that relate piece, we're thinking about what is it that they just said, being able to find the clarifying question if we have one, or if we don't, also reflecting back to them, what is it that they meant? do we actually have the meaning? That's so key. You have to have the meaning of what the person's saying. Even more than the meaning, you have to have the feeling. And that's really key, because a lot of times I was in another business group and somebody was telling me how this person just kept saying the same thing over and over and over to them, just repeating themselves. And I said, did you try reflecting back the feeling? Did you get to the feeling behind it? And they went, ah. And that's really it. When we're really trying to help someone know that they're understood, we need to help them know we hear their feeling.
Okay, yeah. So like reiterating what they've said in your own words back to them is going to kind of move that along.
It will, every time. Yeah.
And what else? Is there any kind of like examples that you could give us in, like you said, like asking questions to get clarity on what they're saying? Like, I guess, I don't know, it's kind of hard to like drum up an example just quickly in my head, but maybe you've got one because this is, you know, your line of work. So like an example of kind of like questioning back the person, like what would that sound like?
So let's just take an example. Most of your listeners are probably in a relationship, a spousal relationship or a partner relationship. Yeah. Okay. So
Sure.
let's take that. So let's just say that there's been a bit of a conflict because there's been a miscommunication. Thought you were going to do this thing and then you didn't follow through and do it, and so now I'm upset. Right. Okay, so if that's the scenario we're working with, then um, the person who forgot to do the thing might not understand how the other person's really feeling when they're trying to express it to them. And if they're not if they haven't had the experience or the knowledge to know to come at it from using an I statement, I felt really hurt when you didn't do this thing. If they're not saying it like that, but you didn't do this thing, right? It's accusatory, and then the other person's left. Well, okay, how do I hear you're upset, and that might be all they say is, I hear you're upset. um, Ultimately, the I hear you're upset might be enough to help tone it down. But if it's said in a defensive way, like tone matters so much, was what I'm trying to get at here. Tone matters so much, body language, all of those things, and intention. It's really intention. It's like, I want to hear you. I want to understand what you feel. And if you're upset with me, let's figure out a way to do it different for next time.
Yeah, because I mean, of course, it's communication, right? It's a two-way street. So just
Yeah.
as much as listening to the other person is important, it's also very important to be able to express yourself in a way that you would hope that that person would understand. And that's probably going to change, I would imagine, right? Like whether you're speaking to a child or a spouse or someone at work, the way that you speak to them and your tone, your body language, all the things, it's not just our words that we say, right? There's so much more to it than that, but really kind of like adjusting that in different situations too, as well as knowing how to actually get that message across is really important.
It is. Speaking to be heard is just as important as listening. Yeah. It's why I added it as a bonus module in the course Listen Your Way to Deeper Connections. We really felt that, my business partner Linda and I, we both really felt that was something that people were asking about. But I did not want to put it first. I think a lot of times in communication, people are like, well, I want to be heard. And most people miss that if you want to be heard, the way to do that is to listen first and to help the other person know that you're listening. And then it can follow naturally from that. So
I love that. And then so if you want to just go over quickly as well, like a few of the other kind of modules that you have in your course or the other like key components that are involved there. I love that it's an evergreen course so people can jump on and just go through it at their own pace. And then you also have your call service, so to speak, so that people can kind of read. There's like different ways that people can go through these processes and start to understand and develop their skills better. I'd love for you to take us through a little bit more of what's involved in your course.
in the course, sure. So we break down the core, the CORE. We break down each one of those, and then give really clear examples so people can understand and apply it in their life. And then we take them through pitfalls of listening, and we give real examples. And the course is intended to the Listen Your Way to Deeper Connections course. We wrote that to be dripped over 21 days, and then we realized that a lot of people just they like to learn quickly. And so we stop the drip. And if you sign up for the course, you have access to all of it. If you want to do it a day at a time and really get the most out of the course, I recommend doing it that way, but you don't have to. So that's a lot of what's in that course. We touch on emotional intelligence in there and talk about the importance of it. And yeah.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing that. I'll be sure to pop that in the show notes. So for anyone who's interested in that, want to have a little look through, they can do so. So just back to some strategy stuff. I love the example that you said with like a spousal kind of like a disagreement. And this kind of leads on to my next question, whether it be a spouse or not, listening to a difficult person. This is something that we talked about the other day. Because when emotions are high and you're, in the middle of an argument, so to speak, or a disagreement of some kind, it is more difficult than normal to regulate, calm yourself, listen intently. So I'd love to know a little bit more about that, what you have to say about, listening to a difficult person.
So most people think that listening starts with the other person. It doesn't. It always starts with you. It always starts with you. And if you're listening to someone who tends to be more difficult to hear for you, you have to make sure that you are calm. That's why I start with that. And if you, at any point during the conversation, you lose that sense of calm, I really recommend that you pause the conversation. Because if you're not calm, you're not going to hear. It's simply our brain chemistry won't allow that to happen. Just in terms of what happens in terms of our access to the prefrontal cortex, that higher thinking part of our brain, we can't access that when we're upset. It's just nobody can. That's the way it is. We're all made that way, and it's really beautiful, actually, when you think about it. But it does take the self-awareness. We talked about self-awareness already, and that it's that self-awareness of knowing, okay, I'm not calm anymore. So let's come back to this and let me get to a place where I am calm, and then let's have another go. That might be a 5 minute kind of break, and it might be I need a little bit more time. The example I usually use with this one is when my son told me he wanted to go into the military. um, I I lost my calm. I was very aware. He was talking to me and I was really trying to follow along, but I wasn't calm anymore. I couldn't hold onto myself enough to hear him. I was upset, and it wasn't a decision. He was not yet 18. This was before. It was just, he needed me to sign off, and this was a decision he really wanted to make. And so and he was throwing things out like, if you don't make this decision, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. And, that kind of throw down. I was like, okay, wait a minute. Let's take a breather before I say things I'm going to regret. And you say more things that maybe we have to undo. Let's just take a pause here a minute. And thankfully, he, having grown up with me, he understood well enough to, when I said, look, let's give me some time to process this, because I'm aware I'm not hearing you right now. And it's important to me. I hear what you're asking me. I understand. And I made sure at that point in the conversation that I reflected back to him exactly all of the things that he had said and all the reasons that he had said. So he knew what I'd managed to get into my brain so far. And then I said, I need some time. And it took me a couple of days on that one. I couldn't find my call every time I tried to think, okay, maybe now I can. I would like spin out again inside my head. I was like, nope, not yet. I wanted to, but it just took some time to get there. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think there's anything bad about that. It took me some time. And I think that we all need to give ourselves grace and permission for that. And when we're really in a relationship that matters, when we're really trying to hear somebody, I think most people are willing to give that time to be able to come back, so that when the conversation does come back, there's real communication that happens. There's real understanding. There's a feeling of I'm seen, I'm heard, and I know I matter by you. Yeah.
Yeah, and a higher chance of a positive outcome for both people, I think, too, right? Like that's
Yes.
huge. It's like the conversation is being had because there's a desired outcome. And if we allow ourselves the time and space, then we're probably better off to reach like closer to reaching that desired outcome rather than it just erupting into chaos.
Yeah. Yes, for sure. I
So
love
you
that,
did
Lydia. Yes.
you did mention an example like with your son, the way that you kind of paused the conversation. I'd love to talk a little bit more about that just to give people some actual kind of almost scripts for
Yeah.
lack of a better word, that they can use. Because I think this is really important. I know for myself, I've struggled in the past where, it does get to that point where it's like, okay, we need to take a break because this is going nowhere. But when emotions are heightened and you're angry or you're upset, I feel like taking that pause and expressing that pause, the way in which you express it is just as important as that it needs to happen. Does that make sense? Because I feel
Yes.
like some people might be, inclined to just storm off or slam the door or be like, I can't do this right now, and just like leave the house or, whatever it is and go for a walk. And that can be more upsetting to the other person if they don't communicate that intention well. So I'd love to know um what kind of like not strategies. Um I'd love to know the kind of wording that you might suggest for someone to use in that instance, because I feel like that's really important.
If you're able to do it, I think the best way is to say, I'm aware I am not calm. I'm aware I can't hear you anymore because I've got too much going on. I'm upset and you matter to me. I want to hear you. Let's take a break and let's see if we can both calm down. I'll calm down. I'll do my work. I'll calm down. Maybe you can do that too, and we'll see if we can come back and have a more productive conversation. Does that sound okay with you? Then you're getting the permission from the other person to be able to take that step away. I think that's really important. We don't, it's not always, it's not always beautiful. If we storm out, we storm out. It happens. You know,
Mhm.
again, I think there's what we strive for, and why we're learning how to get there. It's okay if you've done these other things. I don't want anybody to come away from this conversation feeling ashamed about anything that they've ever done in their life, because the fact is that always gets us to where we're going.
Yeah, and I can say for me personally, like implementing these types of things, it doesn't just take, reading one book or listening to one podcast and then, oh boom, next time I'm in a fight, I'm gonna say super calmly, sorry, I'm a bit overwhelmed. Can we take a pause? I'm probably still gonna freak out
Right.
until, it happens a few times and you learn to kind of move
Yeah.
through the emotions and collect the words and really express yourself in a way that's, positive for both people. So yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up. I think that's important to note as well.
I do agree with you that having some words ahead of time can help. If you've thought about it ahead of time, if you find yourself in the situation, it's more likely you'll be able to access the words than not. So it's definitely good to do this, to do the thinking ahead, to read the books, to listen to the podcast. All those things are really great things. Don't stop doing those. It's not what we're saying, but just give yourself grace if you're in the middle of it. So
Yeah, that's it. Collect the information and then implement the information, but don't get down on yourself if it doesn't go exactly the way you hope the first time. Because this all this stuff, it's developing skills. Like it really is. Like it takes time and it takes implementing it over and over and over and time again for it to become natural to you.
it's practice. It's intention and practice. I tell people listening is easy to learn, but it takes the intention and practice. That's where the real growth happens. That's where the real magic is. Yeah.
Yes, I love that. I love that so much. Um, oh, there was something that was just in my head, right at the tip of my head that I was gonna ask that kind of piggybacked off that. Um, that's okay. It's gone. Um, okay, there was another note I had here which kind of piggybacked off that. So similar to what we were just discussing, where emotions are heightened, you're in the midst of a conversation. Oh, actually, hang on. I'm going to jump back. I remember the thing I was going to say. Um, I think sometimes too, like when we do have these difficult conversations, they're not necessarily so spontaneous, right? I mean, when you're entering into this environment where perhaps a difficult conversation might be had with a difficult person or an issue might be brought up, like often I feel like we can anticipate these things. So again, it's good to have a little bit of a idea of kind of the words that you might choose or the strategy that you might have to take a pause or take a break if things do get heightened. Like I feel like that's also something that we can kind of preempt a little bit and have in our toolkit, before we enter into a conversation or something that might be a bit difficult.
I think if you have trouble, where I want to go after that is if you have trouble extricating yourself from that conversation, you've tried the words I suggested, and the person's still not wanting to let go. I really do think it's okay to say, I really understand that you have a need to continue the conversation, but I really need to have my boundary. And so to protect myself and to protect us, I am really going to step away now. There's, using those words with somebody who's really not wanting to stop. I can think of some people in my life for whom that's true. And sometimes that is uncomfortable for them. And expressing that you understand that that's uncomfortable for them is important. And I think if you can help them to know that should you continue the conversation, you're not going to be able to be kind, that can help, right? Because most people want us to be kind to them. That's we want to feel seen, heard, and that we matter. And
Mhm.
if our words are going to start coming out and they're not in a way that we can phrase them compassionately or kindly, then yeah, backing away is such a good idea, necessary.
Yeah, super important. I love that. Thanks for sharing that. Um, so we've kind of been talking about this already in the conversation without actually specifically using the words, but emotionally regulating during a conversation, similar to kind of what we're talking about. I mean, we're saying, okay, things are heightened. I'm going to take a pause. I'm going to take a step out. But let's take it that next step further. I mean, perhaps, the example with your son, it took you a couple of days to kind of get to the point where you were ready to have that conversation. I'm curious what strategies and tools you use personally to calm yourself down, to emotionally regulate, to bring yourself back down to the level of like, okay, I'm ready to have this conversation now.
Well, you heard me mention that, I would think about it and I could feel myself starting to deregulate. So it was really doing that and then having compassion for myself in those times when he was nowhere around. It was just me and nature, me and my dog. It was just me um, having time to sit with it out of not knowing a better way to just really sit with it, to be with it, to be with myself, to um practice. It was really practicing, okay, practice thinking about it, and okay, now I feel knowing what I felt, allowing myself to know what I felt, and allowing myself to know what I felt, and to also know that my son also had his feelings and they were also valid. And so how was I going to work at allowing my truth to be and his truth to be in the same space at the same time? uh, that's the work I was doing between the I need to stop the conversation now and when I came back. It was okay, I'm ready now to hold my truth and to know yours as well.
So it sounds like there was a lot of sound in the mind. Like your thought process was just kind of going over and over and over kind of what he had said and how you felt during that time, and then being able to kind of go, okay, so that's what I know and that's what I can expect going back into it, and then just kind of like almost in your own thoughts, like talking yourself through the process. Almost, would you say you kind of went over the process, like future planning, like how the next conversation was going to go down at all, or were you just present with what it was?
I was present with what it was, and what I was really working on in the time between was my own feelings. So, okay, I'm unhappy about his choice. Why am I unhappy about his choice? Well, I don't want him to go to war and get killed. Um I I worked a lot to get you to this point in your life, and it would really make me unhappy if that were cut short, and that distresses me. And so sitting with that distress, and what does it mean for, and then sitting with that distress, that's still a distress because because he is in the National Guard and it's a thing now. Touching into that, it's still real for me. Sorry. Uh, Sitting with that, and at the same time trying to always keep in mind that um, his his desire and his path, and letting him have his path, was is critical. Like he gets to have the experience in his life that are going to make him uncomfortable and help him grow. It's not, I don't need to protect him from that. Those need to happen, and it needs to be okay for him to experience those things. And ultimately I don't want him to die. And but what does it mean for him that he's willing to? I mean, part of my faith in the faith journey, I talked about being in the church. So, you know greater love hath no man than this, and he's willing to lay down his life for his friends. Like my son, with his oath in the military to do that, he's living that out in a way that maybe I didn't even realize I was teaching. And so, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, super valid emotions for you to experience during that time, and still now, that being the case. But it sounds like you have an incredible amount of awareness, self-awareness, and you've been able to manage that particular incidents, and I imagine many other incidences that happen in your life where you do go through uncomfortable emotions, and just kind of sitting with them, processing them, figuring out, okay, how am I going to move forward with this? Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, this is why you're here. Like, your level of self-awareness is incredible, and yeah, it's great that you put yourself in a position to help others with this stuff. I think you're a great person to learn from. You're, facilitating courses and opportunities for people to chat, and I think that's amazing. And you're training as well, right? Like, you have people in your
Yeah.
organization that you're not the only person, that people call, and you're there to listen. You have an entire organization of people as well. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm building it. Yes. So I've got two people that I've currently trained. They're not working full time yet. We don't have enough calls coming in, but when we do, they're ready to come on board full time. And I just met another person. Her name's Ashley. I really hope to be able to bring her on for the business side. So yeah, I've got people in mind. So it's good. We just need to get the growth well enough along that we can have them. Yeah. So
Great. Well, it's definitely needed, and it's awesome to, see you growing, and seeing you really being there for people, and helping people change their lives. Like, having someone to talk to, a lot of times I feel like just talking out loud, we can kind of learn a lot more about ourselves, and we can kind of almost figure out our own problem, so to speak, as I air quote, just by saying things out loud. So I think having someone there to hear you is huge, whether it be the service that you offer, or whether it just be in our everyday circumstances, in our relationships, our coworkers, our family, our friends. Listening it really is super important, and it's a fundamental aspect of emotional intelligence, as you can see in this conversation.
it
Are there
really
any
is.
other key points or anything that you'd like to bring up?
If I can teach the world one thing, it's this. And that's when somebody goes, you're listening to maybe it's a friend, and they go, or, even a child, yada, 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 yada. And then they say, and I don't know what to do. So instead of jumping in, because you clearly can see what it is that you think that they need to do, instead of doing that, just take a moment and ask the question, that sounds like that was a lot. Is that something that you need me to just hold space with you? Or did you really want some advice? Do you want to process through and think through some solutions? And then wait and listen to the answer, because that's where the real beauty is. That's really how you help someone. That's what I do with in what I teach. It's um when you really offer that to somebody, you're giving them a very profound gift, truly. If I can teach the world that, I'll have done a great thing.
I love that. I agree. I think that's very powerful, because it's giving someone the opportunity to self-reflect, and become more aware of their own thoughts and feelings and behaviors, and the best course of action for them in that moment.
Yeah.
That's
Most of
really
us have
beautiful.
the answers that we need inside of ourselves. We just need the opportunity to get there.
Absolutely. I believe that wholeheartedly. Oh, that's so good. Amazing. Well, thank you so much. I think this has been a really powerful conversation. We covered some really awesome, key strategies, things to implement, some examples as well. And these are, real life examples that I think will be relatable to a lot of our audience. So I know there's going to be value in this. And I really appreciate your time coming and having this conversation. It's been great.
Thank you so much. It's great. If anybody wants to, if they have questions, having heard our conversation, reach out to me. My email is info@hearingoutLifeDrama. That'll always find me. That's a great way. Also, I'm on social media. If anybody is, I'm on almost all the channels. instead of just choosing like one, like most people tell you to do, I decided I wasn't following that advice, and I was just going to splatter the same thing everywhere and just trust that people are mostly on one platform, and so the people will find me wherever they're at. So whether it's Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or even Pinterest, I'm our Hearing Out Life Drama is there, so you can find us.
Perfect. And YouTube as well.
Oh yeah, that's it.
All
Like
the
all of them,
platforms.
all the things. We do all the things.
I
Linda
love
mostly takes
that.
care of YouTube. I often forget that one. Thank you for making sure we didn't.
I love that so much. Yes. So you can be found on all the platforms. All the links will be in the show notes. Please go and check Deb out. Her stuff is great. I love like your bite size like reels and stuff that you have as well, like on TikTok and Instagram. It's like binge worthy stuff. So go and check it out.
Oh, thank
Um,
you.
and I'll drop your website in there as well so people can check out Hold and all of your offers and programs.
Thank you so much, Livia. This was really great conversation. I hope people find value, and I'm sure that there, if you listen to this, there's other good stuff here too. So make sure you listen to all their podcast stuff. Yeah.
Thanks. All right, cool. I'm just going to stop